We have had a bumper crop of beans this summer, and so with so many different types of beans out on the market, it's hard to make heads or tails of what is what. So I thought I would just walk along with you today and show you some of the different types of beans. Now, to start out with, you have to consider the plant habit of the bean. So in general, you have your pole beans, which are these guys right here. They can grow 8 to 10 feet tall. They definitely need some trellising. And then you have your bush beans, which usually are in the 2-foot range, a lot smaller, and we'll go see those later. While I'm here, these guys, as you can see, have the red mottling on the pods. These are called Boratana type of beans. They're actually dry or shelling beans, and so you would want to wait to harvest these until the pods turn brown and the beans inside dry, so that you can use them in soups and stews throughout the fall and winter. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the dry shelling beans is, yes, you want to harvest them when the pods are brown and the beans inside have dried, but you can certainly eat them as a green bean when they're young and tender. So another one of my favorites is the Romano bean, and these are an Italian bean that can be eaten fresh. And what makes them unique is that it's a very flat and wide pod. This is a really good time to be harvesting it. It's still nice and tender. When it gets to about this size, they're still really good to eat, but you're not going to want to let it go much farther than that. So I don't know what it is about runner beans, but over the past years I have learned to love them more and more. They're really an outstanding bean. Now, first of all, you can see from these beautiful flowers, they're kind of unique in the sense that they come in reds. We have some salmon colored flowers, there's white flowers, and then there's red and white flowers. But the other nice thing about these is you can harvest the pods when they're nice and green. They're not necessarily fuzzy, but they do have a little bit of texture to the pod. But as you can see, they're really, really crisp. And they have a really unique, refreshing flavor to them that's out of this world. The other thing that's really cool is if you let them grow a little bit bigger, if you let the pods grow a little bit bigger, let me find one here. Oh, here's a nice long one. And you open the pod up, you can see the beans that have formed on the inside. They already start turning pink, which is really kind of cool. And even at this stage, you can certainly eat the beans inside. And they also have a really unique, refreshing flavor to them. All right, so moving on to the bush beans. Keep in mind that a lot of the same types of beans can be found in bush or pole. But one of the ones that I wanted to show you here is a French fillet bean. And this is a nice green bean. The key, or the unique characteristic that makes a French fillet bean is that they stay really, really thin. They're delicious when they're steamed, lightly steamed or sauteed, but you can certainly eat them fresh too. Very, very tasty. The other nice thing about bush beans in general is that they tend to come on all at once, and so the harvest is a more abundant harvest at one time, making it really good for canning if you wanted to, or making dilly beans, whereas the pole bean tend to come on a little bit later, and then they also kind of throw out the beans throughout the season. Whether it's a bush bean or a pole bean, harvesting on a regular basis will increase your yields. Another one of my favorites is Edamame Soybeans, and as you can see here, the plant has a different look to it than just a standard green bean. Kind of has fuzzy leaves to it, all the stems have little bits of fuzz to it, and if you look closely, there are pods forming here that are also pretty fuzzy. Now, soybean edamame pods, you're not going to want to eat the actual pod, you're going to want to eat the beans inside of it. So how do you know when to harvest? Well, there's actually a pretty short window when the beans are in their prime before they get really starchy. And the way that I tend to do it is if you look closely here, the pod itself is still nice and green, and if you feel, you can see that the beans have formed inside and they're almost touching each other. Here's another good example of one. And that's a good indication that it's ready to go. If the pods have turned yellow, that's a little bit too late. These also, so you boil them 5 minutes, pour some nice kosher salt on them, and then pop the beans out of the pods, and they are absolutely delicious. Now, you might take a look at these beans and say, wow, these plants aren't really looking too good, but actually what this is it's a dry shelling bean that's starting to die back, and the pods are starting to form and get nice and plump beans on the inside. Now, this still probably isn't ready to harvest yet, but I am gonna just open up this pod so that you can see that the beans inside are getting nice and plump, and they're also starting to dry down a little. At this point, I'd probably cut the watering on it so that it can continue to dry. So the last two beans that I want to talk about today, first of all, on my right here, we've got oodles and oodles of yellow wax beans. And they're called wax beans because you pick one and it has a waxy texture to the pod. Great steamed, great fresh. You can also can these guys. And then finally, how could I not talk about just your standard, good, fresh green bean? And that's what we have over here. You can see this variety in particular is just loaded with beans. I like to harvest both of these when there are small beans that have formed inside the pod. I think that the flavor comes out a little bit more, but you don't want to wait until they get nice and plump on the inside, and then the texture of the actual pod can get a little tough as well. So between all these different types of beans, there's bound to be some that you will enjoy. If you haven't tried one, I highly recommend growing something that you've never tried before and seeing if you like it.